Welcome to our video series on how to help children as they journey with Jesus. In our previous session, we looked at how to pray with children and how we can build confidence with children as they pray to God their Father. And we also looked at what it's like to experience Jesus answering our prayers and to remind children of this and to help them celebrate what God has been doing, that they can see prayers are relevant today and that Jesus does listen and answer. In this session, we are looking at how to disciple children. Now, I was recently reading a book called Reconnecting the Generations by Daphne Kirk, in which it says, if every child who has given their life to Jesus over the last 25 years was still active for the kingdom, where would the church be today? And then she goes on to say, the only thing we leave of eternal value on this earth is the next generation. And to me, this statement shows that there is a real urgency to be discipling our children. And what a privilege it is for us as leaders and parents to nurture our children in supporting and guiding them as they journey with God. Now, if we take a look at the example of Jesus when he was discipling his 12 disciples, we see that Jesus had taught them and he was preparing them for ministry and helping them to become dependent on God. In Matthew 16:24, it says this, that Jesus says to his disciples, if any of you wants to be my follower, you must give up your own way, take up your cross and follow me. So the disciples lived for him. They followed his ways and they learned directly from Jesus. They spent time in his presence. For us, it's important to be a disciple of Jesus ourselves, to enable us to model our lives on him as we help prepare and equip our children to do the same. So what does discipling children look like? Well, I've got 8 helpful suggestions that could be used as we disciple our children. So the first thing is children learn by our example. Now, I used to plan my sessions, preparing all that I was going to say to the children, making sure that the message came across and the children could take hold of it. But I soon realised that actually it's more than a session. You see, actions do speak louder than words. And if I didn't live my teaching out, then the words I spoke had no value. You know, it reminds me of this time when my mum used to have a really bad back and during the day she would be slouching slightly and putting her hand on her back and saying, oh, my back. And one day she was babysitting for my little nephew who was 3 years old at the time, and he started singing the well-known nursery rhyme of the wheels on the bus. And he got to the part of the grannies and he went something like this. The grannies on the bus go, oh my back. And he was slouching over, holding his back at this time. It was hilarious. But you know, my mum was just being herself, just showing her feelings and what was going on in her life at that time. And yet my nephew picked up on it. In everything we do, the way that we live our lives, the way we present ourselves, the things that we do and we say, in every way, we need to be striving to live for Jesus, to live by his example and to model him. The verse of John 13:12-15 says this, when he had finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes and returned to his place. Do you understand what I have done for you? He asked them. You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you should also wash one another's feet. I've set you an example that you should do as I have done for you. You know, I love this verse. It emphasizes for us to be following Jesus' example in the way that we live and are teaching to our children to do the same. Point number 2. Let's point our children to Jesus. We want to see their hearts transformed. We want to see children have a heart and a love for Jesus, but we cannot do this for them. Our role is to be pointing them to Jesus, and we can do this by reading the Bible together and helping them to hear and to understand what God is saying to them. We want to be guiding them on their journey. And step 3 would be studying the Bible. You see, Jesus had told many stories to the disciples, equipping them for the ministry ahead. And in discipling our children, we want to be able to use the Bible to equip them, to help them in their future as they follow God's word. So let's take a passage one at a time and unpack it with questions and give opportunities for the children to explore. And step 4, let's ask spiritual questions. You see, we need to be direct in the questions that we ask to help children to think more deeply about seeing God at work in their lives, helping them to understand and see the relevance and to help them in developing their faith. Whilst it's not about measuring them on how well they're doing, you know, genuinely we want to be able to see where they're at and knowing how we can support them more. So I'm going to say a few example questions and for us to be saying and asking our children that may be helpful for our children as they process these answers that encourage them on their journey. So here are some example questions. How do you feel God was with you this week? In what way do you recall feeling God's love? How did you feel God help you this week? What qualities would you like to grow in to be more like Jesus? What could you do to put this into action? How do you feel your relationship with God has grown over this week? But also, when we ask the questions, be prepared for the unexpected. You see, children can catch us on the hop with their responses, and wherever their answers take us, we need to be ready to steer and equip them. And then step 5, let's listen to our children. Let's make time to hear what they have to say. In listening to them, in spending time with them, we're showing that we care, that we're there for them, that we take an interest in their lives. Step 6, share testimonies. Let's be open as we share stories that we have faced when we follow in Jesus. How has being a disciple of Jesus helped shape you? For children, hearing from someone they know that they trust that's telling them a situation whereby God has made a difference for them will certainly help them to see how relevant Jesus is today. So whether you're a leader or a parent, let's think about all the times where Jesus has been there in your life. And how many of those times do your children know about? Step 7, connect our children into the church family. You see, we want to help children have a sense of belonging, that they feel part of the big church family. You know, they're not just a child who attends, but they are part of the church. Perhaps they could join on a rota with adults to be part of the welcoming team, or they could be taught by the PA team to learn how the technology works. Perhaps they could share and serve the refreshments or lead the prayers or share testimonies and lead in church worship. Whatever that is, let's help them feel part of that responsibility and part of that team. You know, children love that sense of responsibility, and finding a role for them will just help build and encourage them and help them to feel valued as a member of the church. However, for some children, it's just as important that we connect them with other members of the family. Step 8, we want to be praying for them. You know, the most well-known prayer from the Bible is the Lord's Prayer, and it's found in Matthew chapter 6. And it was first taught by Jesus as he was teaching his disciples how to pray. We can learn so much from the Lord's Prayer. But what stands out to me is clearly this. If Jesus' disciples needed to learn to pray, then how much more do we, as Jesus' disciples ourselves, need to learn to pray? And how much more do our children also need to learn to pray? But it's not just about praying with our children. It's about us making that time to be with Jesus in our daily walks with him. For us, as his disciples, to be praying for those that we disciple. Now, we could spend time with Jesus on our journey to work, as we go out for walks, last thing at night, but whatever works for us, we want to be making time to lift our children up in prayer. And finally, as I bring this session to a close, discipling children is never going to be a quick fix. We're in it for the long haul. We never stop being a disciple of Jesus. And so we owe it to our children to also continue to disciple them. Why not join me on our next session, which is how to help children walk with Jesus?